Welcome, travelers of the dark. Here, every story is a winding road where light dares not enter. Settle in, draw the curtains on the world outside, and prepare to hear what most would rather forget. Tonight, we dive into real stories, stories that happened to ordinary people, but left scars even time couldn't erase. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a nightmare, a bad dream like any other. But the second, the third, and the countless times that followed, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just a dream. It always happens the same way. I wake up in the middle of the night, my body completely paralyzed. My eyes are open, but I can't move, I can't speak. I try to scream, but my voice is trapped somewhere between my mind and my throat. The room is the same as always. The half-open door, the furniture against the wall, the closed window. But there's something else there with me. I can feel it. At first, it was just a hunch, an irrational fear that seemed to emerge from the void. But over time, I began to realize that it wasn't just a feeling. There was something there, something moving in the darkness. The fourth or fifth time, I saw the shadow for the first time. In the corner of the room, something tall and twisted stood watching me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I knew I was being stared at. The figure didn't move right away. It just stood there, analyzing me, as if deciding something. The terror I felt was unbearable. I desperately tried to move a finger, anything to free myself from that torpor, but it was in vain. Then, it moved. Slowly, it came toward me, unhurried, as if savoring my terror. The closer it got, the heavier the weight on my chest felt, as if something was sucking the air from my lungs. When it reached the side of my bed, I could see its form more clearly. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its neck bent at an unnatural angle. The darkness seemed to wrap around it like a second skin. Then it leaned over me, its face, if it could be called that, hovering over mine. A hoarse, crackling voice escaped its invisible mouth. "You can't move, but I can." At that moment, I felt its thin, icy fingers touch my arm. A shiver ran down my spine, and the sheer need to escape jolted me awake. My lungs filled with air all at once, and I sat up in bed, sweating and trembling, but the terror didn't leave. Because when I slowly turned my head to the side, I saw the reflection in the bedroom mirror. The shadow was still there, and it was smiling. The next day, I started researching sleep paralysis. I read accounts of people who had experienced similar things: dark figures, presences in the room, the inability to move. Everything pointed to something scientific, explainable, a sleep disorder in which the mind wakes up, but the body does not follow. That explanation gave me some comfort, but not enough. What I saw didn't seem like just a hallucination. The paralysis began happening more frequently, 3, 4 times a week. I avoided sleeping, but exhaustion eventually won. And every night, when I opened my eyes, it was there. One night, something different happened. I woke up in the same paralyzed state, but this time, the figure wasn't in the corner of the room. It was on top of me, its freezing fingers pressing against my forehead. I could feel its breath, a stench of mold and rotting flesh filling my nose. And then, something new, words that seemed to be whispered directly into my mind. "Now you see me. Soon you will hear me. Then you will feel me." I wanted to scream, to thrash, but my body remained imprisoned in that suffocating darkness. Then, suddenly, I felt something slither beneath my skin. A sharp pain ran down my spine, as if something was rooting itself inside me. When I finally regained movement, I ran to the mirror. My reflection looked normal, but something inside me wasn't. I could feel it, crawling beneath my skin, whispering in my mind. It was no longer just in the corner of the room. It was inside me. The first time it happened, I thought I was just dreaming. I woke up in the middle of the night, lying on my back, my eyes wide open in the darkness of the room. My body wouldn't respond. I tried to move my fingers, turn my neck, but nothing. Only my eyes moved. My chest felt heavy, as if someone were sitting on it. Panic crept in slowly, turning into silent despair. My breathing was short, shaky. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice was trapped inside me. That's when I felt it. I didn't see it right away, but I knew something was there. The presence was dense, suffocating. A strange smell filled the room, a mix of old dust and something rotten. My eyes struggled to see through the dimness. In the corner of the room, where the streetlight didn't reach, a silhouette began to form. It didn't move like something alive. It was slow, distorted, as if it were trying to understand its own shape. There was no face, just a dark void where eyes should have been. But I knew it was looking at me. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to believe it was just a nightmare, that at some point I would wake up for real and everything would disappear. But it didn't go away. Then came the whisper. Not a sound, but a thought that wasn't mine. Something cold crawled through my mind, a voice without an owner, pronouncing words I didn't understand, but I could feel them. Stay. A shiver ran down my spine. The shadow took a step forward. My entire body begged to react, to flee, but I was buried in the bed, a prisoner of my own fear. And then, as if it had had enough fun, it disappeared. My body was mine again. I gasped, pulling air in as if I had just emerged from underwater. Trembling, I sat up in bed and looked at the dark corner. Nothing. I spent the next day in a daze. I didn't sleep the following night, or the one after that. But eventually, exhaustion won. And then, it happened again. This time it wasn't just a presence, it was a real physical weight. Something climbed onto the bed with me. Cold breath brushed against my skin. And then, fingers, long, cold, wrong, touched my face. My own body refused to be mine. The nights became a battlefield. I resisted sleep. But when I gave in, the darkness swallowed me. Every night, the thing came closer, more intimate, as if it wanted something from me. And now, even when I'm awake, I still feel its gaze. I still hear its voice, telling me to stay. I never used to fear sleep. It was my escape, my solace after long days filled with the mundane struggles of life. But now, the thought of closing my eyes fills me with dread. Because when I sleep, I wake up. And when I wake up, I am not alone. The first time it happened, I chalked it up to exhaustion. I had been working late, drinking too much coffee, and staring at my laptop screen for hours. When I finally stumbled into bed, the weight of my own fatigue dragged me under like a stone sinking into deep water. Then, suddenly, I was awake again. Or at least, I thought I was. My eyes were open, my room dimly lit by the street lamp outside. Everything looked normal. The pile of clothes on the chair, the half-empty glass of water on the nightstand, the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. But something was wrong. I tried to sit up, but my body refused to obey. My arms, my legs, every part of me felt encased in cement. I opened my mouth to call out, but no sound came. Panic blossomed in my chest, my breathing quick and shallow. I had read about sleep paralysis before, but nothing had prepared me for the sheer terror of experiencing it firsthand. And then I felt it. The air in the room shifted, the temperature dropping as if an unseen door had been left ajar, letting in something cold. A presence, heavy and oppressive, settled over me. I couldn't see it, not at first, but I could feel it. Watching. Waiting. The shadows in the corner of the room deepened, thickened, until they peeled away from the wall and took shape. A figure emerged, impossibly tall and thin, its form barely distinguishable from the darkness that birthed it. I could make out no features, no eyes, and yet I knew it was staring directly at me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to thrash, to run, to do anything but lay there helpless as the thing moved closer. Its presence pressed against my chest, a weight that stole my breath, suffocated my thoughts. I swore I could hear it breathing, slow, deliberate inhalations that seemed to rattle with an inhuman resonance. Then it whispered, "You let me in." The words weren't spoken aloud. They slithered into my mind like fingers probing through the cracks of my consciousness. I felt invaded, violated in a way that went beyond physicality. My entire being recoiled from the words, but I couldn't shut them out. The figure leaned closer. My body screamed to move, to fight, but I remained a prisoner to my own flesh. And then, cold fingers traced along my jaw, sending ice through my veins. I don't remember how long it lasted. Maybe seconds, maybe hours. Time lost all meaning. But then, as suddenly as it had come, it was gone. The pressure lifted, the shadows receded, and my body was mine again. I sat up gasping, lungs aching from the strain of forced stillness. It wasn't real, I told myself. Just a hallucination. Just my brain playing tricks on me. But then, it happened again. And again. And again. Each time the entity returned. Each time it came closer. It no longer lingered in the corner, it stood at the foot of my bed, then at my side, then hovering over me. Its whispers became clearer, more insistent. "You let me in." I stopped sleeping. Caffeine became my crutch, my lifeline. But exhaustion is a cruel master. No matter how hard I fought it, eventually my body would succumb. And every time I closed my eyes, I woke up again in that frozen nightmare. Then one night, something changed. I was paralyzed as usual, my breath shallow, my body motionless. The figure was there, its elongated fingers reaching toward my face. But this time, something inside me snapped. I willed every ounce of strength I had into my hand, my fingers, my wrist. The pain was excruciating, as if I were fighting against invisible chains. And then, I moved. Just a twitch, just the smallest shift of my fingers. But the figure recoiled, it hesitated, and then it spoke again. "Not yet." The room went silent. My body lurched back into motion, and I bolted upright, my skin slick with sweat. The shadows in the corner were just shadows again. I thought I had won. I thought maybe I had broken free. But the next night before I fell asleep, I heard it again. A whisper right next to my ear. "Soon." I travel for work. Not the pleasant, touristy kind of travel, but the kind that forces me to sleep in cheap hotels, moving from one city to another, solving problems that are never really mine. Over time, you learn that all these places have something in common. The smell of old carpet, curtains that never closed properly, and that unsettling silence in the middle of the night. That night, I was exhausted. I had spent the entire day in meetings, and all I wanted was to take a shower and sleep. The hotel I stayed at was on a quiet road with an outdated reception area and a single night employee, a middle-aged man who seemed too bored to even give me decent service. I went up to my room on the third floor. As soon as I entered, I noticed that characteristic smell of mold mixed with cheap cleaning products. I dropped my suitcase on the floor, went straight to the bathroom, and turned on the shower. That was when I noticed something strange. The mirror was fogged up, as if someone had just stepped out of the shower. I ran my hand over the cold surface and noticed that something had been written there, but the letters had already blurred too much for me to read them. My body shivered, but I forced myself to ignore it. Maybe it was just paranoia from being so tired. I took my shower, got dressed, and lay down. The room was too silent, an oppressive silence. I grabbed my phone to distract myself until my eyes started to get heavy. Just as sleep was about to take over, a faint sound woke me up. It was the sound of dripping water. I got up, irritated, thinking I had left the faucet slightly open. I walked to the bathroom, and to my surprise, the sink was dry. But the sound continued. I looked up and saw a small, dark stain on the ceiling, from which a slow, rhythmic drop of water was falling. I decided to ignore it. I went back to bed and closed my eyes. Then I heard something that made my stomach turn. Footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps inside my room. My heart started pounding. I kept my eyes closed, convinced it was just my imagination. But then, a sound even worse than the footsteps echoed in the room. The bathroom door slammed shut. I sat up suddenly, my heart racing. The room was completely dark, but now I could hear breathing. It was coming from the bathroom. Something was in there. I fumbled along the wall for the light switch, and as soon as I turned it on, everything went silent again. The bathroom was empty, but on the mirror, written in trembling handwriting, a phrase paralyzed me. "You weren't supposed to be here." I left the room without grabbing my things. I stumbled down the stairs, my breath unsteady. When I reached the reception desk, I found the employee still sitting there, looking at a yellowed newspaper. He lifted his eyes to me, completely unbothered. "Something wrong, sir?" I wanted to scream, demand answers, but all I managed to say was, "There's someone in my room." He furrowed his brow as if he had heard this before. He put down the newspaper, sighed deeply, and without looking at me said, "This hotel used to be a hospital. There was a fire, many people died, but sometimes they come back. Most guests just ignore it. You can switch rooms if you'd like." I left without looking back. I grabbed my suitcase and drove all night, feeling like someone was still watching me through the rearview mirror. I have never been a superstitious person. I always thought that stories of haunted hotels were just urban legends to attract tourists or scare children. But after what I experienced that night, I began to believe that there are things we simply cannot explain. It all started when I had to travel for work to a small town in the countryside. Since the company covered all expenses, I booked a reasonably comfortable hotel, but nothing luxurious. I arrived late at night, exhausted after a long meeting. The night clerk, an elderly man, handed me the key to room 306 with a look that, at first glance, seemed just like fatigue, but later I realized it concealed something more. The hotel was old, with narrow hallways and worn-out carpet. The smell of old wood and dampness lingered in the air. As soon as I entered the room, I felt a strange cold, as if the environment was colder than the rest of the hotel. I ignored the feeling, attributing it to the air conditioning, and threw myself onto the bed, ready to pass out. In the middle of the night, something woke me up. At first, I thought it was the sound of the wind banging against the window, but soon I realized it was a different sound, a whisper, low, almost imperceptible, but constant. At first, I thought it was coming from the room next door, but as I fully woke up, I realized it was coming from inside my own room. The bedside lamp flickered for a second before turning off on its own. My heart started pounding. I couldn't see anything in the absolute darkness. I tried to turn it back on, but the switch was unresponsive. I grabbed my phone to use the flashlight, and that was when I felt it. Something on the edge of the bed. A weight, as if someone had sat there. I held my breath. My mind tried to find logical explanations for it. Maybe it was just the bed adjusting to my weight. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me due to exhaustion. But then came the smell. A strange, metallic odor. Blood. Panic took over me. I turned in bed slowly, and with the weak light from my phone, I saw something that still sends chills down my spine. There were bloody handprints on the sheet, right beside me. I jumped out of bed, trying to think, trying to convince myself that this was a mistake, a bad joke. But the room was empty. There was no sign of anyone. I looked at the door, which was still locked. I ran to the bathroom, washed my face, took deep breaths. I needed to get out of there. I quickly dressed, and as I opened the door to leave, I almost ran into the night clerk, who was standing in the hallway as if he had been waiting for me. His eyes showed no surprise, only a morbid resignation. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low, almost a lament. What happened in that room?" My voice trembled. The old man sighed and looked away for a second. "Many years ago, a woman stayed here. She was running from something, or someone. In that very bed where you slept, she was found dead, blood all over the mattress. The case was never solved. Some say she's still here, waiting for justice." A shiver ran down my spine. I walked past him without saying anything else and ran down the stairs. I checked out in a hurry, not caring that it was still early morning. I preferred to sleep in my car than spend another minute in that room. I never went back to that town. I can no longer sleep in hotels without remembering the feeling of that weight on the bed, those whispers in the dark. And to this day I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up in time? I have always loved traveling alone. The silence, the freedom to make my own itinerary, the chance to explore cities without rush. But after my last trip, I never booked a hotel again without researching its history first. It was a business trip to a small town in the countryside. I arrived at the hotel late at night after a tiring flight and a long car drive. The place was an old building with classic architecture, imposing yet clearly worn by time. The neon sign flickered intermittently, and the reception was empty when I walked in. After waiting a few minutes, a thin, pale man emerged from a side door. His uniform was impeccably clean, but his face bore a strange expression, a mix of curiosity and distrust. He greeted me formally and handed me the key to room 407, offering no additional information. I took my suitcase and headed for the elevator. The hallway on the 4th floor was long and silent, with thick carpeting that muffled my steps. The walls had faded floral wallpaper, and some doors looked like they hadn't been opened in years. My room was at the end of the corridor, and as I inserted the key into the lock, a shiver ran down my spine. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite place it. The room was simple but functional. There was a double bed, an old wardrobe, a small desk, and an oval mirror beside the bathroom door. The air was thick with the scent of mold and aged wood. I closed the heavy curtains, placed my suitcase beside the bed, and went to the bathroom to wash my face. That was when the first strange thing happened. As I lifted my head and looked into the mirror, I froze. For a brief moment, I was certain I saw a shadow standing behind me. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. My heart pounded. I tried to convince myself that it was just exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. I lay down and tried to sleep, but the hotel's silence was unnerving. There were no sounds of other guests, no footsteps in the hallway, nothing. Then, around 3 a.m, I was startled awake by a sound, a low whisper coming from the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the sound came again. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely real. I turned on the bedside lamp and looked around. The room appeared exactly the same, but the wardrobe door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it before going to sleep. Swallowing hard, I got up slowly and approached the wardrobe. With a swift motion, I pulled the door fully open. The inside was empty, just my jackets hanging. Yet the feeling that someone was there lingered. I decided I didn't want to stay there any longer. I started packing my things to go down to the reception and request another room, or if possible, leave the hotel entirely. But when I reached the door, it wouldn't open. The lock was stuck. I tried turning the key, but it wouldn't budge. I banged on the door, called for help, but the hotel remained eerily silent. My chest tightened with the suffocating sensation of being trapped. I grabbed my phone to call reception, but the call wouldn't go through. The signal was weak, almost non-existent. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the mirror beside the bathroom. I didn't want to look. Everything inside me screamed to ignore it and find another way out. But it was impossible. My eyes slowly drifted toward the mirror. In the reflection, something moved. It wasn't me. A dark shadow hovered in the corner of the room near the wardrobe. But when I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. Yet in the mirror, the figure remained still, as if watching me. My fingers trembled as I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the mirror, shattering the glass into dozens of pieces on the floor. At that moment, the bedside lamp flickered violently, and a high-pitched noise filled the room, like a muffled scream coming from inside the walls. I needed to get out. I started pounding on the door with all my strength, kicking and pushing with my full weight. Suddenly, as if it had never been locked, the doorknob twisted on its own, and the door swung open. I bolted out, running down the hallway and dashing down the stairs. The reception remained empty. The bell on the counter produced no sound when I pressed it repeatedly. Then something caught my attention. The guest register book lay open on the counter, and my name was written inside, but the checkout date had already been filled in. For the day before. My blood ran cold. I hadn't been there for more than one night, and even if I had, why would my checkout have been recorded before I had even left? That's when I heard slow footsteps behind me. I turned around slowly, and there, at the far end of the lobby, standing in the darkness, was the shadow. No longer just an indistinct figure in the mirror. It was tall, with an elongated silhouette and deep, empty eyes. It didn't move, but I felt as if I were being pulled toward its presence. I didn't wait to find out what would happen. I ran out the front door, not caring about my suitcase or anything else. I only stopped when I was inside my car, the engine running, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the hotel seemed different. The windows were all dark, as if it were completely abandoned. The neon sign no longer flickered. It was as if the hotel had never been in operation. I drove nonstop until dawn. When I finally felt safe enough to stop at a gas station, I searched the hotel's name on my phone. It had been closed for over 10 years after a series of unexplained guest disappearances. One of them, according to reports, never checked out. My name is Ethan. I live in Portland, Oregon, and work as a freelance video editor. The solitary routine has always been something I appreciated. No annoying coworkers, no endless meetings. Just me, my computer, and my creativity. Everything changed the day I moved into this apartment. It was a small but cozy studio. I was excited when I found it, especially for the affordable price and quiet location. The first month went well. I worked during the day and watched movies at night. However, it was after the second week that something strange started happening. Have you ever had the feeling that you're being watched? The feeling started subtly. First, small things moved out of place. My remote control, which I always left on the coffee table, appeared on the kitchen counter. My mouse changed position overnight. Small things, easy to ignore. I convinced myself it was just my own absent-mindedness. Until the first recording. One night, I woke up to a strange sound coming from my living room. Something like a whisper. My heart raced, and I lay there for a while trying to understand if it was just in my head. I grabbed my phone and checked the security cameras I had installed in the apartment just in case. Nothing. Everything seemed normal. However, when I reviewed the recordings the next day, I noticed something strange. At 3:17 a.m., the screen went black for a few seconds. When the image returned, my office chair, which had been pushed against the desk, was a few inches back, as if someone had sat there. But I live alone. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to rationalize it. A glitch in the recording? Maybe a system bug? I spent the day trying to forget, but at night, I had trouble sleeping. Around 3 a.m., I heard the whisper again. This time, it sounded like my own name. Ethan. I jumped out of bed and turned on all the lights in the apartment. My stomach turned when I saw the bathroom door slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it before going to sleep. I walked toward it, each step heavy with fear. When I slowly pushed the door open, expecting to find some logical explanation, all I saw was the mirror. And what I saw in it made my blood run cold. The door behind me was open, revealing a dark silhouette standing at the entrance to my bedroom. I turned instantly, but there was nothing there. Just my ragged breathing filling the silence. I ran to my computer and reviewed the most recent recording. The video showed something that filled me with absolute terror. For a brief moment, at the exact time the screen went dark, a face appeared reflected in the mirror. My face. But it wasn't me. The eyes were sunken, the smile too wide, and it was staring directly at the camera. I turned off the computer and left the apartment that same night. I never went back. I never tried to understand. I rented another place and left all my things behind. Even today, when I pass near that neighborhood, I feel something watching me. as if that reflection still follows me, as if it's waiting for me to return. Have you ever felt like something is watching you when you're alone? If you ever do, run. My name is Daniel. I am a writer, and a few months ago I rented an isolated house by a lake in Minnesota to finish my book. The idea of being alone, far from the city, had always appealed to me. The sound of the water, the wind through the trees, the absolute tranquility. Everything seemed perfect. Until that night. It was late, and I was finishing a chapter when I heard the knocks on the door. 3 firm knocks. The sound echoed through the empty house, making my chest tighten. I looked out the window, expecting to see a lost neighbor, but there was only darkness and the reflection of the moon on the lake. I cautiously opened the door. It was an elderly woman. She wore a worn-out dress and a faded blue scarf wrapped around her neck. Her face was wrinkled, but her eyes were intense. There was something strange about her, something I couldn't quite define. "Good evening," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "May I come in?" I hesitated. I was alone, in the middle of nowhere. Something about her deeply unsettled me. "Do you need help?" I asked, keeping my hand on the door, ready to close it. "Yes, I used to live here," she replied, gazing into the house. "May I come in, just for a moment? I'd like to see how it looks now." My skin crawled. I knew that this house had belonged to a family for many years, but according to the owner, the previous residents had moved to another state. So who was this woman? "I don't think that would be a good idea," I began to say, but she took a step forward. "There is something you need to know about this place. Something we left behind. Something that may still be here." My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at me to shut the door in her face. But before I could, she said something that completely paralyzed me. "Daniel, please, you don't want to end up like him." I had not told her my name. My breath caught in my throat. How did she know my name? I stepped back, ready to lock the door. But then I saw it. Her gaze was fixed on something behind me. I turned slowly. In the reflection of the window, there was another figure inside the house. A dark silhouette, standing in the corner of the room. A figure that hadn't been there before. When I looked back at the door, the woman was gone. The night was silent, as if nothing had happened. But I knew I was no longer alone. My name is Lucas, and I have never been a man of many fears. I spent most of my life seeking solitude, believing that isolation was a refuge, a way to reconnect with my own essence. That's why I accepted the offer to take care of a decommissioned observatory in a remote region of Alaska. 3 months alone, surrounded only by the cold, the vast white of the snow, and the starry sky. I was eager for this peace. The observatory was perched on a cliff, offering a breathtaking view of the frozen ocean. The building was old but functional. A generator provided electricity, and the supplies were enough for the entire winter. I had a small room, a communication room with an old radio, and an observation tower with a gigantic telescopic lens pointed at the cosmos. Everything seemed perfect. For the first few days, I adapted well. I explored the surroundings during the day and spent hours at night observing the stars. I slept little, but it was a peaceful sleep. At least until things changed. The first thing I noticed was the sound. On the 3rd night, when everything was silent and only the wind howled outside, I heard something coming from the cliff. It sounded like a distant murmur, too low to distinguish words. I walked up to the tower and looked through the telescope, scanning the darkness. Nothing but the frozen landscape. I stayed there for a while, trying to understand what could have caused that noise. In the end, I convinced myself it was just ice cracking in the distance. The next night, I heard it again. This time, it was louder. It seemed closer. And there was a pattern, as if it were words whispered into the wind. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the presence of that sound unsettled me in an inexplicable way. I decided to record it with my digital recorder, and the next day, I tried listening again. The recording captured only the wind, but I knew what I had heard. On the fifth day, something changed. I woke up with the feeling that I was not alone. The sound was closer than ever, as if it was right outside. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the entrance, opening the door just a crack. The icy wind slashed against my skin, but there was nothing outside, or rather, almost nothing. Footprints in the snow. They came from the cliff and stopped right at my door. I felt my body tense, as if every instinct was screaming at me to lock everything and pretend nothing had happened. But my curiosity was stronger. I followed the footprints for a few meters, but they simply vanished into nothing, as if the person had evaporated into the darkness. I went back inside and locked all the doors. From that night on, I started noticing something even worse. Reflections. Passing by the bathroom mirror, I saw something that made my blood freeze. For an instant, it wasn't my reflection staring back at me. It was something that looked like me, but the eyes were wrong. Deep. Empty. The face was too pale. I blinked and everything went back to normal. I couldn't sleep that night. The following nights were worse. Now I saw the figure in the glass of the observation tower, reflected against the starry night. Always in the corner of my vision, always just out of focus. My own reflection watching me back, with an almost imperceptible smile. On the 10th night, I heard footsteps inside the observatory. I ran to my bedroom door and held the lock with all my strength, my heart pounding against my ribs. The sound stopped outside. Absolute silence. But I knew there was something on the other side, waiting for me. The next day, I did what anyone would do. I turned on the radio and called for help. The response came through full of static. No team can reach you until next week. Hold on. 7 days. I couldn't leave. And each night, the reflection became clearer, more real. I avoided mirrors, avoided any reflective surface. But I knew it was there, waiting. On the 15th night, I couldn't resist. I went up to the tower and looked through the glass. There was no reflection. Behind me, a low chuckle. The next moment, everything went dark. I woke up in the snow. The observatory doors were open, empty. I was outside, with no memory of how I got there. But one thing was different. The glass reflected an image. But it was no longer me. And from inside the observatory, I could see my own silhouette staring out. My name is Gabriel, and for reasons I may never fully explain, I was the only one to make it out of that cabin alive. I work as a university professor and have always been a firm skeptic. Things like ghosts, curses, and supernatural presences were nothing more than unfounded legends to me, at least until that winter. It was my friend Helena who organized the trip. She, Marcos, Daniel, and I rented a secluded cabin in the Colorado mountains to spend a week away from the chaos of the city. It seemed perfect. Snow, a fireplace, drinks, and good conversation. the kind of retreat we all needed. The drive to the cabin was peaceful. When we arrived, everything seemed fine, though the place had an air of abandonment. Helena joked that the cabin looked like the setting of a horror movie. We laughed and went inside. The first night was normal. We cooked together, drank wine, and played cards. But by the second night, something strange happened. I was up late reading in the living room when I heard footsteps upstairs. I assumed it was Marcos or Daniel going to the bathroom. However, when I looked toward the staircase, I saw something strange. Daniel's bedroom door was slightly open, and he was inside, fast asleep. In the other room, Helena and Marcos were also in bed. So who was walking upstairs? A chill ran down my spine. I closed my book and walked to the stairs. The footsteps continued. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was pacing the hallway. I climbed the stairs cautiously, my heart pounding. When I reached the top, everything was silent. The footsteps had stopped. I looked around, but there was nothing except the dim light and the cold wind slipping through a half-open window at the end of the hall. I was about to close the window when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. There were footprints in the dust on the floor. Footprints that did not belong to any of us. Footprints that ended right behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. I went back to my room, trying to rationalize. Maybe the cabin's owner had been here recently. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe that. The next morning, I told everyone what had happened. Daniel laughed and said I was just getting spooked by the cabin's atmosphere. Helena, on the other hand, seemed unsettled. She said she had also heard strange noises the night before. We decided to ignore it, but on the fourth night, things got much worse. We were in the living room, drinking and talking, when the front door of the cabin swung open by itself. The freezing wind sliced through the room. We rushed to close it, but Helena pointed at something outside. Someone was standing near the closest tree. A tall, motionless silhouette. Marcos grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the figure, but before the light could reach it, it was gone. That was enough. We decided to leave first thing in the morning, but we never got the chance. That final night, I woke up to a horrible sound. A muffled scream coming from Helena's room. I ran to her door, but it was locked. Marcos and Daniel were already there, pounding and calling her name. We broke the door open. Helena was gone. Her window was open, and outside the snow was disturbed as if something had dragged her into the forest. Footprints, but not just hers. There were larger footprints, many of them. Daniel ran to grab the car keys, but he couldn't get the cabin door to open. Something had locked it from the outside. The radio wasn't working. We were trapped. And then we heard the footsteps again. This time, they weren't coming from upstairs. They were coming from the roof. I don't know how we made it through that night. The footsteps continued for hours, moving back and forth. Occasionally, we heard something like deep, heavy breathing. Something was hunting us. When the sun rose, the car was unlocked. Helena was never found. The police searched for days but found no clues, no signs of forced entry, no footprints beyond what we had seen that night. Just snow and silence. I never went back to that cabin, but sometimes in the middle of the night, I still hear those footsteps. My name is Kaio, and for a long time I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Now, after everything that happened, I'm no longer sure what's real and what isn't. It all started on an ordinary night, coming home from work. I lived alone and depended on the subway to get around. I took the same line every day, and I already knew every station, every sound, and every familiar face in the train cars. But that night, something was different. The subway was eerily empty. It wasn't unusual to find a nearly vacant car late at night, but this time I was the only passenger. The lights flickered occasionally, and the air felt much colder than usual. I ignored the uncomfortable feeling and kept scrolling through my phone. But when I looked at the window, something made me freeze. We passed through a station I didn't recognize. The name on the sign was worn out, as if no one had used it for years. The worst part was that I was certain this station didn't exist on this route. The train didn't stop, but for a brief moment, I saw silhouettes on the platform. People in old-fashioned clothing, standing still, staring at the car, staring at me. My heart pounded. I quickly turned my head away, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion. But when I looked forward, I nearly screamed. At the far end of the car, there was a man who hadn't been there before. He wore a worn-out black suit, and his face was cadaverous, pale as wax. His gaze was locked onto me, but his eyes were hollow, impossibly dark. They looked like empty voids. I swallowed hard and looked away. I pressed the stop request button, but nothing happened. No response. No voice announcing the next station. I was trapped. The next station was even stranger. Moldy walls, dim lighting, and distorted graffiti. The train slowed down. This time I saw it clearly. The people on the platform weren't just standing still. They were moving toward me. I jumped to my feet, ready to run, but where to? The man in the suit was still there, closer than before. The car filled with the scent of damp earth and rusted iron. The station vanished as the train moved on. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing. When I opened them, the man was gone, and I finally recognized the next station. My stop. I rushed out of the car as fast as I could and looked back. The train looked normal. Ordinary passengers, nothing out of place. That nightmare was over. Or so I thought. The next day, as I entered the subway station, I glanced at the tracks before stepping onto the escalator. There, in the shadows, were the hollow eyes of the man in the suit. Watching me. Waiting. And I knew I would never take that trip alone again. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old, and I currently live in Louisville, Kentucky. But before I say anything else, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt something that just shouldn't be there? Not a ghost, not a demon. Something worse. Something that doesn't belong anywhere. Something that, even now, as I tell you this, makes me want to lock every door in the house and sleep with the lights on? Yeah, I felt it. And to this day, I don't know if what happened to me in that house was some kind of mental breakdown or something far too real for our understanding. Back in 2017, I moved into house number 104 on Lincoln Street. The rent was ridiculously cheap for a full house, and the neighborhood wasn't even that bad. I was fresh out of a divorce, trying to start over. I jumped at the chance without thinking twice. There was just one problem. Nobody told me about the damn basement. You know that kind of staircase, narrow, made of damp wood, reeking of old dirt and rust. That's what led down there. And from the very first day, I felt it. Something was wrong. It wasn't noises, no shadows. It was a presence. Like if I ever went down those stairs, something would be waiting. Not moving, not hiding, just waiting, watching, breathing, even if I couldn't hear it. At first, I ignored it. I locked the basement door with a padlock and shoved a dresser in front of it. But the more I avoided it, the more it seemed to want my attention. At night, the walls didn't creak. They throbbed, not with sound, but with pressure, like the house was holding its breath, like the basement was awake. Then the dreams started, always the same. Me walking down the stairs, not the basement, just the staircase, step by step. But I never reached the bottom, and something was down there, calling me without words, just existing. And then, one night, I woke up, standing in front of the basement door. Again, I wasn't sleepwalking nearby. I woke up, standing, and the padlock key was in my hand. I had no idea how I ended up there. I was sure I'd gone to bed, door locked, lights off, same routine. But there I was, standing in front of that door like I'd been summoned. Calm, way too calm. I unlocked it, without thinking. The door creaked open like something had been asleep behind it for a long time. And then the smell hit me. Not mildew, worse. It smelled wet, metallic, like rot soaked in time. I grabbed the flashlight that hung by the kitchen and started walking down. One step, then another, then another. The old wood groaned under my weight, and the beam of my flashlight flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. I counted each step. 8, 9, 10, 11. Wait, the basement only had 7 steps. I looked up. Darkness, not just dim, gone. Like the top had vanished. That's when I heard it. Not a sound, a voice. Now you're ready, Daniel. It came from behind me, but it wasn't outside my ears. It was inside. Not like a thought, more like an invasion. Like someone had stepped into my mind and spoken from within. I couldn't scream. My body wouldn't let me. The only thing I could do was keep walking. I lost track of time. The staircase felt infinite. Until, finally, solid ground, dirt, cold, packed earth. A single hanging light bulb buzzed overhead, swaying slowly. And in the center of that basement, under that light, was a chair. Something was sitting in it. I swear to you, on everything you believe in or don't, it didn't have a shape. Not a human one. Not an animal. Just a blur. A vibrating shadow, like static, trembling out of sync with reality. But I knew it was watching me, even without eyes. Then it spoke again. You live here now. That's when I realized I couldn't move. Not my legs, not my arms. Frozen, completely conscious, but paralyzed. And then it stood up. The shadow buzzed harder as it rose from the chair, and the sound in my ears grew unbearable, like someone had shoved a tuning fork into my skull. Then it touched me, not physically. It was more like it sank into me, and I felt this wave, this gut-wrenching nausea, and a sadness I've never experienced in my life, like remembering every moment of rejection, abandonment, betrayal, all at once. Then, darkness. I woke up on the living room floor, basement door locked, dresser back in place, and the padlock key in my mouth. Since that day, I haven't gone down there. But every night, every single night, at 3:17 a.m., the kitchen light flickers. 3 times. And I know, he's still down there, waiting. My name is Lucas. I'm 28, and I live in Tacoma, Washington. I live alone in an old building, One of those with tall windows and creaky hallways that sound louder at night. 3 floors, and my apartment is right in the middle. 2nd floor, window facing the street. I've always been kind of a recluse, to be honest. Not the type to make small talk with neighbors or hang out in the hallway. But I never had issues with anyone. Just a regular life. Remote work, headphones in, shows at night, pizza on the weekends. Everything changed when the guy in the right window showed up. Funny thing is, I don't even know his name. We never spoke, never even nodded at each other. But he's haunting me to this day. It started on a Tuesday night. I was in the living room watching TV when I happened to glance out the window, and there he was, in the window of the apartment next to mine, completely dark inside, just standing there. I could only see the outline of his face, lit faintly by the streetlight outside. He was staring directly at my window. Not at me, at the window, eyes wide, head still. No blinking. I watched him for a few seconds, trying to figure out if he was actually looking at me or just staring off into nothing. But just as I was about to close the curtain, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A dry one. Small. The kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. I shut the curtain immediately. It was weird, sure, but I shrugged it off. We always try to rationalize things, right? But the next night, he was there again. Same spot, same stare. By the 3rd night, I couldn't chalk it up to coincidence anymore. So I did something stupid. I opened the curtain just a little and stared back. I stood there, still, waiting to see what he'd do. He reacted. First, he tilted his head. Left, then right, like he was studying my face. And then he raised his hand, slowly, and pointed at me. That's when I shut every window and slept with my bedroom door half closed. I didn't really sleep, though. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him climbing through the window, not running, not attacking, just entering. Slowly, like he had all the time in the world. The next night, I grabbed my phone, ready to record. I opened the curtain just a crack and filmed. I needed proof, to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy. But when I watched the video, his window was empty, like no one lived there. But I saw him, 3 nights in a row. I knew he was there. The next day, I went to the building manager and asked who lived in 204, the unit next to mine. He looked at me like it was no big deal and said, "Oh, that one's been empty since the woman moved out. Been at least 5 months." 5 months? I just said, thanks, and walked away, cold all over. I didn't explain, but my mind was spinning. How? I saw him every night, same spot, same time. I saw that man. That night, I didn't close the curtain, and sure enough, he showed up. Same smile, same lifeless stare, but this time, he wrote something on the window, with his finger. I couldn't read it at first. Looked like a name, or a phrase. It was crooked, but when I tilted my head, I could make it out clearly. "You're empty too." I woke up on my living room floor the next day. No memory of fainting. My head was pounding, and the front door was unlocked. Since then, he's there every night. And every night, he writes a new phrase on the glass. I stopped trying to make sense of it. I stopped trying to record it. I stopped sleeping. I live off caffeine and pills now. And the worst part? Today, when I looked in the mirror, my reflection didn't smile back. My name is Marina. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Silver Lake, a quiet neighborhood in Los Angeles. I work as a freelance designer and spend most of my time at home. I've always been discreet, reserved, the kind of person who prefers digital interactions over face-to-face ones. Maybe that's why it took me so long to notice. It all started when I reactivated an old social media profile. I deactivated the account years ago, but curiosity got the best of me. All my old posts were still there: travel pics, parties, late-night ramblings. The kind of stuff you post thinking no one's really paying attention. But someone was. On the second day after reactivating, I got a message. New account. No profile picture, no followers. You shouldn't have come back. I figured it was someone messing around, maybe an ex, maybe a troll. I ignored it, blocked the account. But then the comments started, on old posts. This was the day you cried in the hotel room, remember? You lied in this caption. I was at that coffee shop. I deleted the comments, blocked again. Another account showed up, then another, and another, and they all seemed to know details no one else could have known. Things I never told anyone. One night, while I was on the phone with a friend, the doorbell rang. A delivery, but I hadn't ordered anything. Inside the bag was a single printed photo. Me, sitting on my couch, taken from outside the window. I went to the police, filed a report, showed them the messages, but with no concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I stopped using the account, deactivated it again, changed all my passwords, installed cameras, upgraded my locks. The messages stopped for a while, until one day, coming back from the store, I noticed something on my doormat, a folded printed page. I opened it right there. You still look in the mirror thinking no one's watching you. Since then, I get a new page every week, always a different sentence, always something I thought, but never said out loud. Something intimate, something that hurts. I tried moving to a new apartment, but during my first week at the new address, the same message showed up, folded neatly on the doormat. Now, when someone looks at me on the street, I don't wonder if it's him. I just think, which one of them is it? My name is Rafael. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've been living in a small town called Townsend in rural Massachusetts. It's a quiet place, surrounded by forests, trails, and that kind of silence that only feels peaceful during the first few months. After that, it becomes something else, a kind of emptiness that echoes inside you. I moved here after I lost my sister. It was a stupid accident. She slipped on a trail and fell off a cliff. It was a hike we used to do together since we were teenagers. And that day, I just didn't go. She went alone. It was spring. She texted me saying the weather was perfect and the forest felt different, more alive. I never replied. Since then, my relationship with silence and nature has changed. Trees are no longer just trees. The wind sometimes whispers her name. Anyway, after everything happened, I had to get away from the city, from work, from everything. I ended up here, renting a house far from town. One of those old wooden houses, dark and drafty, with a damp basement and windows that never close properly. It was all I could afford, and truth is, I wanted the isolation. I wanted to disappear for a while. But here's the thing. No one tells you about running away. Sometimes what you're trying to leave behind comes with you. It was during my second winter here that it all started. At first, it was small things, a noise in the middle of the night, a strange smell coming from the basement. Nothing supernatural, nothing that couldn't be explained. But the thing that bothered me the most was the lime. Yes, lime. That white powder used to absorb moisture, eliminate odors, even preserve bodies. In my case, it was spread across part of the basement, in a circle, a near perfect circle, about 2 meters wide. It was there when I moved in. Weird, sure, but the landlord said it was to keep mold and fungus from growing. The kind of technical explanation you accept because you don't want to think too hard about it. But each week that circle looked wider, fresher, like someone had been renewing the lime. And the strangest thing, it never faded. Even with the damp basement floor, with time passing, it stayed perfectly intact, untouched. It wasn't until the end of February that I broke my own rule. Never go into the basement at night. There was a sound, a dry rhythmic crack, like wood breaking at even intervals. I went down with a flashlight, and when I saw the circle, I froze, right at the center. There was something, a small wooden box, old, covered in dust. And it hadn't been there before. The box was about the size of a shoebox, maybe a bit smaller. Dark wood, slightly burnt edges. It looked very old. And the strangest detail, it sat exactly at the center of the lime circle. Positioned with such precision, it didn't feel like an accident. I stood there for a few minutes, frozen. The flashlight trembled in my hand, and my mind wavered between two instincts. Run back upstairs, or open that box. Of course I opened it. It wasn't locked. No latch, no padlock. Just a heavy lid that groaned as I lifted it. Inside were two things. An envelope, yellowed with age, my name written on it in neat handwriting, and a small mirror, its surface cracked in one corner. I picked up the envelope first. My hands were slick with sweat, and it was hard not to let the lime dust smear the paper as I unfolded the letter. It was short. You took too long. This burns more in you than in the others. The circle protects, but it also attracts. When the mirror is fully broken, come down again. And remember, don't speak to her. No signature, no date, nothing else. I actually laughed when I finished reading, a nervous, dry laugh. Don't speak to her? Who the hell was her? I went back upstairs, taking the box with me, but I left the mirror. Something in me said it shouldn't leave the circle. That night, I didn't sleep. The next day, I called the property manager, trying to get information. Asked about the basement, the lime, any history tied to the place. But all he said was, I just handled the paperwork. Never had the guts to spend a whole night in that house. That stuck with me. In the following days, I started hearing footsteps downstairs, always near the basement. Sometimes I'd catch a faint scent of perfume. Feminine, the same kind my sister used to wear. And the mirror started cracking more. The fracture spread slowly, like a web. Every time I peeked through the stairs, I felt a weight in my chest, as if someone was looking up at me from the dark, as if she was waiting. Then came the night everything changed. I woke up to a sharp sound, glass shattering. I rushed downstairs. The box was gone, but the mirror was still there, now fully broken, shattered across the lime circle. And there were footprints. Bare, small, feminine, leading from the center of the circle to the bottom of the stairs. At the top, the basement door was open. And in my bedroom, the letter, the same one. But now with one more line, scrawled in new handwriting. You spoke to her in your sleep. The lime was no longer just a detail in the basement. It was a boundary, a barrier between what is real and what hides behind the things we pretend not to notice. And I had crossed it. I read that new sentence over and over again. You spoke to her in your sleep. I didn't remember any dream, no voice, no images. But my body, it remembered. I woke up drained, like I'd run miles in my sleep. I was soaked in sweat, cold to the bone, and my arms were covered in scratches I didn't have the night before. That morning, all the windows in the house were wide open, even the ones I had bolted shut. And in the middle of the living room, someone or something had drawn a new lime circle. Smaller, but perfect. I stood there for hours, literally hours, just staring, thinking if it was still possible to run. But run from what? Escape who? That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because she wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, it felt like someone pressed their forehead against mine, something cold brushing against my thoughts, and speaking, wordlessly, Raphael. It was my sister's voice, or at least, that's what she wanted me to think. I kept repeating to myself, this isn't her, this isn't her, this isn't her. On the fifth night, the entire house started to breathe. The floorboards creaked without pause. The lights flickered like the place was submerged in something electric. And that's when I went down again. The lime in the basement was gone, vanished. In its place stood a mirror, brand new, intact, and it reflected something that wasn't me. In the image, I was smiling, but I wasn't smiling in real life. The mouth was too wide, the eyes empty, and behind me, in the reflection, someone was walking up, slowly, silently, barefoot. I turned around, heart pounding. No one. When I looked back at the mirror, a new sentence was now scratched into the inside of the glass. Now you are the mirror. That night, I slept in the house for the last time, or tried to. Because in the middle of the night, I finally understood what she wanted. Not my soul, not my death. She wanted my image, my reflection, a body to inhabit, a face to wear, an identity to claim. The next morning, I went to the bathroom, and in the mirror, my reflection blinked a full second after me. After that day, I stopped looking in mirrors. Not because I was afraid of what I might see, but because, deep down, I knew that reflection no longer belonged to me. I canceled the lease, sold what little furniture I had, and left. I'm not even sure where to. I just knew I had to get away from everything. Today, I rent a small room in another town. No basement, no mirror. I only catch glimpses of my face in shop windows, puddles, glass doors. And even then, I don't trust it. I try to live a normal life. But sometimes when I'm walking down a quiet street and see someone staring at me from the other side, head tilted slightly, I know it's her. Or worse, I know it's me. Inside someone else. My name is Andre. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a freelance audio editor. I work from home here in Columbus, Ohio. Ever since I dropped out of audio engineering school, I've become a sort of digital handyman. I do everything from restoring old tapes to editing podcasts. And honestly, I enjoy the solitude. Headphones on, coffee by my side, and no one to interrupt me. That's exactly why I accepted Mr. Wyatt's job. He found me through a freelancer forum and said he had a collection of old cassette tapes he wanted to digitize. His voice was calm, deliberate. He told me they were personal recordings from the 70s and 80s, and that some of them were damaged. He needed me to clean up the audio, cut out the static, remove background noise. Nothing unusual. The box arrived in the mail 3 days later. Inside were 7 tapes. Each had a handwritten label, dates, sometimes names. One of them stood out immediately. No writing at all. It was the only one completely unmarked. It even had a strip of black tape covering the real window, like someone had tried to hide the contents. I saved that one for last. I started with the easy ones. Birthday parties, kids playing, old voices telling bad jokes. Simple stuff, nostalgic even. Until I got to the final tape, the nameless one. I carefully loaded it into the deck, opened my audio monitor, adjusted the levels, and hit play. The first few seconds were nothing but static. White noise, typical for tapes that old. But then, slowly, a voice began to emerge. A man's voice. Hoarse, distant, like he was far from the microphone. He repeated the same phrase. "Can you hear me now?" Pause. Noise. Then again. "Can you hear me now?" And again, and again. Each repetition felt a little more desperate, as if the question wasn't really a question but a plea. I paused the tape, rewound, played it again, this time watching the audio spectrum, scanning the frequency range. That's when I noticed something. There was another voice, buried, almost inaudible, behind the main one. I used a vocal isolation plugin, boosted the gain, and then I heard it. A woman's voice, whispering behind the man's question, but she wasn't saying the same thing. "You need to forget." That phrase, "you need to forget," kept looping in my mind. It wasn't random static. I knew that. The woman's voice was real, not mixed in, not added later. It felt like it was hidden, like she was speaking through the tape, from behind time. I replayed the track, listened again, and this time I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't repeating the same phrase. By the 3rd time, it had changed. "He's watching." By the 5th, "You shouldn't have listened." I closed the project, saved the files, got up and took a long, hot shower, hoping the steam would clear my head. But her voice, both of their voices, stuck with me like an echo that wouldn't stop. Even without headphones, I could still hear it. That night I had a dream. I was sitting exactly where I always work, at my desk, with the tapes beside me. But everything was off. The screen was black. The light outside the window was red, like the sun had gotten the color wrong. And behind me, someone was breathing. I didn't turn, but I knew the breathing was mine. I woke up soaked in sweat, heart pounding. The next day, I reopened the project. I decided to test the recording in reverse. It's an old trick. People used to hide messages that way in vinyl records and old tapes. I reversed the track, and I heard it. Not the man, not the woman. My name, repeated, whispered, in the same voice as the woman from the night before. "Andre?" I froze, stared at the screen, closed the session, shut it all down. I emailed Mr. Wyatt, asking exactly where that tape came from, told him what I'd found. He replied an hour later. Just one sentence. That tape wasn't supposed to be there. I read that email at least 10 times. That tape wasn't supposed to be there, I replied, asking where it came from, if he knew what was on it. No answer. Mr. Wyatt vanished. No more emails. His phone number? Disconnected. That night, out of pure instinct or stupidity, I decided to listen to the tape one last time. I did what I never do. I turned off the lights in the studio, put on closed headphones, cranked the volume. I hit play and let it run all the way through. Only this time, The recording had changed. The man's voice wasn't asking, "Can you hear me now?" anymore. Now he was saying, "Now I know where you are." Over and over. His voice grew closer with each repetition, like it wasn't just audio anymore, like it was in the room with me. The vibrations didn't stay in the headphones. They drilled straight into my skull. And the woman's voice? She wasn't whispering anymore. Now she was screaming. "Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off." But I couldn't. I was frozen. The sound had become a presence, dense, alive. I could feel it moving behind me, breathing. Then came the final sound. A whisper, clear as day, like someone was standing right next to me. No mic, no headphones. "Now you're recording too." I yanked off the headphones, threw them across the room, stumbled out of the studio, knocking over boxes, cables, everything. But the tape kept playing on the computer. Except now, it wasn't the tape anymore. It was my voice, begging, desperate, like someone trapped on the other side of the audio crying out, "You need to forget. I don't edit anymore. I don't touch sound. And I sleep with earplugs, music playing, anything to block out the silence. Because in the silence," she whispers again, "and the worst part? When I looked at my portable recorder on the desk, it was turned on, still recording. And on the display, it read, File 001, recording for 19 days. The exact number of days since I received the tape. You know that strange feeling when everything seems to be going too well? Like something's out of place, even if you can't quite put your finger on it? Yeah, that's exactly how it all started for me. My name is Matthew, but most people call me Matt. I'm 32, a history teacher at a public school here in Eugene, Oregon. I've always been skeptical, rational, never been the type to believe in supernatural stuff. But what happened to me after I moved? Well, honestly, I don't know what I believe anymore. After the divorce, I needed a fresh start. I'd saved up a little money and found a house at the end of Holloway Street, a half-forgotten road, almost a dead end, lined with old trees and cracked sidewalks. The house was way too big for just me, but the price was so low I actually got suspicious. I thought about walking away, but the realtor, a woman in her 60s named Lorraine, convinced me it was only because the house had been on the market for a while. "Nothing to worry about," she said with that tired, forced smile. I moved in on a gray Saturday. The sky felt heavy, like the day itself knew something was off. My few pieces of furniture arrived in an old truck driven by a guy who didn't say a word. He just stared at the house like he expected it to move on its own. Everything was normal at first. Quiet, peaceful, maybe too peaceful. The neighborhood was almost deserted. Now and then, an elderly person would pass by for a morning walk, but no one made eye contact. No neighbors came to introduce themselves. I felt like an intruder, even though I'd bought the place fair and square. The first night I slept there alone, I had a strange dream. I was lying in bed, frozen, and heard slow footsteps coming up the stairs. The floor creaked like someone heavy was trying not to make noise. The steps stopped right at my bedroom door, then breathing. Loud, uneven breathing. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. The doorknob started to turn. I woke up drenched in sweat. It was 3:17 a.m. Here's the thing, the doorknob was turned, like someone had just left the room. Little things started happening over the next few days. Objects moved. The radio would turn on by itself, always tuned to some station I didn't recognize. playing old music from the 1940s. One day, I found a loose floorboard in the basement. Under it, a torn page from a diary. Elegant handwriting. The entry read, "He's still here. Even after the fire, even after the screams." That sentence echoed in my mind the rest of the night. Have you ever felt watched in your own home? Like someone standing in the corner of the room, just waiting for you to look? Because that's exactly how I started to feel. I kept the diary page. I read it so many times I could recite that sentence with my eyes closed. He's still here, even after the fire, even after the screams. The basement always gave me a bad feeling. It wasn't just the mold, the darkness, or the cobwebs. It felt like the air down there was dense, heavier than it should be, like the space itself didn't want to be entered. Then I started hearing noises at night, scratching from inside the walls, and not the kind of sound you can rationalize as mice or old pipes. These were methodical, slow, like someone dragging the nails through the wood. Once I even pressed my ear against the wall and swear to God, I heard breathing, software, slow. Have you ever tried convincing yourself you're just being paranoid? I tried, but each attempt only dragged me deeper. One day, I decided to look for more pages from the diary. I went back to the basement with a flashlight and a pounding heart. I dug through old boxes, pushed aside dusty shelves, and found black and white photos. All of a woman in a white dress, smiling in a garden I recognized as the backyard. But in every single photo, everyone, she was alone. And yet there was always a shadow near her. Not a tree shadow. It was tall, thin. In one image, it looked like the shadow had its hand on her shoulder. My flashlight started to flicker. I thought it was the battery, but it was new. When I finally got a steady beam again, it pointed directly at a door I hadn't noticed before. A dark wooden door in the corner of the basement, partially hidden behind some shelves. The strange part? The door was locked from the outside, with a thick chain and a heavy padlock. Someone had made damn sure to keep whatever was inside in. I knelt down and stared at the door. The silence wrapped around me like a blanket soaked in ice water. No creaks, no pipes, just nothing. And then, from the other side of the door, 3 slow knocks. Thud, thud, thud. I ran. I literally tripped up the basement stairs. That night, I had another dream. This time, I was inside the house. But it was different. The walls were blackened, scorched, like they'd been through a fire. The ceiling dripped filthy water. I walked through the rooms as whispers filled the air, echoing from every direction, all repeating the same thing. Why did you open it? I woke up gasping, the sound of the doorbell ringing non-stop. I got up, heart racing, looked through the peephole. No one. But when I opened the door, just to be sure, there was a diary page folded neatly on the doormat. Same handwriting. If he wakes up, there's no turning back. Someone was trying to warn me. I knew that now. But who? And more importantly, what exactly was locked inside that door in the basement? I couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. The next day, I went to the public library downtown, the older one, where most of the archives are still physical. That place smells like dust and time. I asked for help from a librarian named June, a short, polite older woman who frowned the second I mentioned Holloway Street. House 1448? She asked. I hadn't even told her the number yet. I just nodded, trying not to look surprised. Wait here, she said, and disappeared for almost 20 minutes. When she came back, she was holding a yellowed folder stuffed with old newspaper clippings and faded documents. "You can't photocopy this," she said, "but you can read it here." The first article that caught my attention was dated 1979. Fire destroys historic home on Holloway. Woman survives. Husband presumed dead. Body not recovered. It was vague, like they were avoiding details, but there was a photo of the house. My house. And the woman in the photo. She was the same woman from the pictures I'd found in the basement. Another article, dated a few weeks later. Neighbors report screams from abandoned Holloway home. Police find no signs of break-in. And another, from 1980. Tragedy returns to Holloway Street. New family flees home. After reports of hallucinations and paranormal activity, authorities cite emotional instability. I went home with a throbbing headache. That feeling of being watched returned like a punch to the chest. It felt like the house was breathing again, watching me. That night, I did something I promised myself I wouldn't. I went back to the basement with a crowbar. The chains were still there, rusted. The padlock looked fragile with age. One hard hit and it snapped. I opened the door. A wave of burnt wood and damp hit me like a wall. It was a small room. No windows. The walls were scratched with something dark. Maybe ink, maybe not. One phrase repeated over and over. "He lies." In the center of the room was a chair, old wooden, with leather straps on the arms. A restraint chair. From the ceiling hung a single light bulb, the kind you pull on with a string. I pulled it. The light flicked on. That's when I saw it. In the corner, a small metal box, locked. Inside were more pages from the diary. Dozens, maybe more than 20. I spent the whole night reading. The woman from the photos, Margaret Keller, was an artist. She described how her husband, Jonathan, changed after starting a secret project in the basement. He became isolated, whispered to the walls, spoke of a mirror that doesn't reflect. In the last pages, Margaret wrote that she had locked him in the room, that he begged in another voice, that the voice said it wasn't him, that it just needed a body. The diary ends with a single sentence, scratched over and over until the page tore. It's not him. It never was. I dropped the pages. I was freezing even with the heater on. A cold so deep it felt like it came from inside me. Then I heard the floor creak. From the basement door, I wasn't alone anymore. I turned slowly, still holding the crowbar, my fingers slick with cold sweat. The basement door was open, but I remembered locking it, bolting it shut. Nothing made sense anymore. But I knew, with every nerve in my body, that I wasn't alone down there. I kicked the diary box across the floor. The chair in the center of the room looked freshly used. And for a moment, I swear, I saw handprints on the backrest, like someone had just gotten up. I stumbled up the stairs without looking back. I barricaded the basement door with everything I could find, padlock, chain, even a heavy cabinet. I needed to think. That night, I tried to sleep, but it was pointless. My dreams were warped, sick. I saw the woman, Margaret, strapped to the chair, her eyes hollow, repeating one line over and over. "You let him out. You let him out. You let him out." I woke up gasping, then heard footsteps above me in the attic. I had never even gone up there. I grabbed the crowbar again and climbed. The pull-down hatch creaked like dry bones. The air up there was dry, still, like it hadn't moved in decades. My flashlight caught it instantly. A mirror. Huge. No frame, just mounted straight to the wall. But the weird part? It didn't reflect anything. Nothing. I was standing in front of it, flashlight aimed directly at it. And still, nothing. No light, no shape, just this blank, hollow surface that felt wrong, like a hole in reality. On the floor beneath the mirror, something was scrawled in dark ink, or maybe something else. He enters through the image, but doesn't leave through it. My mouth went dry. A sharp creak behind me made me spin around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, there was something there. Not my reflection. A figure, tall, slender, with impossibly long arms, standing behind me. I spun again. The attic was empty. The thing only existed in the mirror. Then it moved. Not in the reflection, in the room. Something bumped the attic stairs. I turned to run, but the stairs were gone, like they'd never been there. I was trapped with it. The last thing I heard before my flashlight died was a whisper, not in my ear, but in my mind. He enters through the image. Now you are the mirror. I must have stayed in the attic for hours, maybe a day. Time felt broken. The flashlight was dead. My phone too. But it wasn't the dark that scared me. It was the way reality warped in that place. Nothing felt real. Not even me. The mirror never left. Neither did the figure. It didn't move when I looked at it. Only when I turned away. Closer. Closer. I tried to close my eyes. But even in the dark, I could see the mirror. Like it had entered me. Rooted itself somewhere deep inside. Eventually, the stairs came back. I climbed down in a haze, not sure if I was still myself. The house had changed. The furniture was all in the wrong places. The walls were lined with old wallpaper I didn't remember. And in the living room, photos of me, but younger, my face different, my eyes darker. I ran to the bathroom, and this time the mirror did reflect. But it wasn't me. The face was familiar, yes, but the eyes were hollow. And the smile, I wasn't smiling. But the reflection was. I could see teeth, too many teeth. I collapsed to my knees, shaking. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I turned. The woman from the diary, Margaret, was standing there, older now, drained. She said one thing. I tried to warn you, but now he's inside you. Then she vanished. It's been weeks. Life looks normal. I go to work, buy groceries, smile at neighbors. But sometimes I say things I don't remember thinking. Sometimes I wake up standing in the basement, staring at the chair. Sometimes I paint over mirrors with black paint, but they always come back. And every once in a while, in a store window or bus glass, I see him, inside me, looking back, waiting. If you ever find yourself on Holloway Street, and you see house number 1448, just keep walking, because if you go inside, he might see you, and you know what happens once he sees. I never paid much attention to that kind of thing, you know? Stories about people hearing noises at night, seeing shadows. I always figured it was just the mind playing tricks. But after what happened to me, I don't even like talking about it. Because what I went through was so subtle, so slow, that even now I wonder, was it me or was it something else? My name is Elijah. I live alone in Charleston, in an old but charming house that I inherited from my grandparents. I work as a book editor, the kind of job that lets me stay home most of the time. I've always loved the quiet, the isolation. But now, that same silence feels like it's watching me. It started on a Wednesday in October. The first time was at 3:07 a.m. 3 sharp knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They came from the hallway, clear as day. I was in my bedroom, door halfway open. I got up slowly, heart racing but trying to stay logical. I walked through the entire house. Nothing. No open windows. No fallen furniture. Everything exactly in place. I tried to forget it. Convinced myself it was just the house settling, or maybe a neighbor's sound echoing weirdly through the walls. But the next night, same time, same sound. Knock, knock, knock. This time, they came from the wall behind my bed. I started losing sleep. I'd lie there with my eyes wide open, waiting. Sometimes the knocks came, sometimes they didn't. But when they didn't, it felt worse, like something was just watching me wait. I started writing it all down in a notebook. Time, location, intensity, like a journal. I needed to understand, or at least give it shape. One night, I decided to record. I left my phone filming, aimed at the wall. I fell asleep from pure exhaustion. The next morning, I watched the footage, nearly 3 hours of silence, until the exact moment, 3:07. The knocks, clear, loud, and right before them, a voice whispering something I couldn't make out, like it was saying my name, like it was calling me. And then, in the video, a shadow crossing the wall. No source, no explanation. That night, I slept with the lights on. When the knocks came, they weren't from the wall. They came from the bedroom door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, I answered. Who's there? Silence. 10 seconds later, a response. Not out loud, but inside my head. You let me in. I don't remember the rest of the night. I just know I woke up the next morning on the living room floor, with the notebook in my hand, and a new entry written, not in my handwriting. Tonight, it was you who knocked. Since then, there haven't been any sounds. No more knocking. But sometimes I wake up in front of my bedroom door with my hand closed, like I've been knocking, again and again. I've been working as a nursing technician for 5 years. I've always handled things fine, but there's one kind of shift no one wants to take: the night shift. It's not just because of the fatigue, the empty hallways, or the heavy routine. It's because of what happens when no one's looking. My name is Natalie. I'm 28 years old. And if there's one thing I've learned during the cold nights at San Vicente Hospital, it's that silence is never complete. There's always a sound, a beep, a whisper, a noise coming from somewhere it shouldn't. The hospital I work at is old, built in the 1950s, and despite some renovations, the original structure still pulses beneath the newer walls. The floor I'm assigned to at night is the 4th, General Clinic. Most of the patients there are elderly. Few have companions. Almost all are asleep by 10 p.m. That night, it was just me, the security guard, and one nurse from another wing. The lights were dim. I was making notes at the nurse's station when I heard the sound of a walker in the hallway. Clack, clack, clack. Normal. A patient going to the bathroom, maybe. I got up and went to check, but all the room lights were off, doors closed. I went back to my station with that let it go feeling, but the sound came again. Clack, clack, clack. This time, slower, like whoever was walking wanted to be heard. I grabbed my badge, my clipboard, and walked to the end of the hall. When I turned the corner, I was sure I saw someone. A shadow passed quickly, entering a room that should have been empty. Room 413. According to the records, that room was closed for electrical maintenance. It had been vacant for days. The key wasn't even supposed to be available. The door was slightly ajar, I pushed it gently. Lights off. No movement. But the air inside felt wrong. Warm. Stifling. Like someone was breathing in there. I turned on the light. Nothing. But on the floor, footprints. Bare. Wet. And on the back wall, a phrase written in something dark. "Where is my room?" I stood frozen for a few seconds. When I caught my breath, I radioed the security guard. He came, did a full sweep. Nothing found. We said it was probably a prank, a confused visitor, or even a patient hallucination. Rationalizations to keep us going. I returned to the station, tried to continue the routine, but at 3:14 a.m., the intercom from room 413 rang. Yes, the intercom from the empty room. The screen showed only static. I answered, trembling. On the other side, a rasping voice whispered, "This isn't my floor." I couldn't sleep the next day. That voice kept replaying in my head. The way it sounded like the mouth was full of dust. Like the words hadn't been used in a very long time. For my next shift, I came in early. I pretended everything was normal, but inside, I was on edge. I went straight to the hospital's archive room. They still keep physical folders of patients from before everything was digitized. Old school policy just in case. It took me almost an hour, but I found it. Room 413. Patient Miguel A. Rivas, admitted in 1983. The file was strange. A lot of missing pages, but what was there was worse. Miguel had been admitted after several dissociative episodes. He was young, 22 years old. No psychiatric history, no family contact. The medical notes described him as claiming to be on a floor that didn't exist. He repeatedly asked to be taken to his correct room. He said the hospital was wrong, that the voices wouldn't stop, that he saw other patients where there were none. One note from the doctor said, "Patient shows obsessive pattern with spatial displacement, believes he is on the wrong floor in the wrong time, sedated after nighttime escape attempt, kept repeating the phrase, 'This isn't my floor.'" It sounded too familiar. Miguel died in the hospital. Cause? Unknown. Cause of death listed as sudden cardiac arrest. Odd detail, he was found lying down in room 413, which had already been closed at the time. I closed the folder and went back to my shift. Everything was too quiet, like the story was staring at me from the corners of the hallway. That night, again at 3:14, the intercom rang. I answered. Same voice. "Please, take me to my right room." Before I could reply, a shrill noise pierced the line, like a muffled scream buried under thick walls. Then the call dropped. I went to the room. This time I took the security guard with me. The door was locked, something I was sure I hadn't done. When we opened it, the room was different. Same space, but the furniture was arranged in an old layout. Iron bed, standing lamp, crucifix on the wall. Everything looked from the 1980s, and in the center of the bed, a deep impression, like someone had just gotten up. I looked at the guard. He was pale, said he was calling the supervisor. He left, and then I stood there, frozen, because the bathroom mirror flicked on by itself, and in the reflection, I saw someone standing behind me. I turned. No one. But on the wall, shaky letters appeared. "You found my room. Now show me the way." After that night, my body went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. I started walking the hallways like someone moving through an invisible maze, hoping to see a shadow again. Miguel Rivas, room 413. A patient who died looking for a place that maybe never existed. Or maybe was forgotten by whoever built this hospital. But he was still searching. And now, for some reason, he had asked for my help. The next night, I asked to stay alone in the unit. I made up an excuse, said I needed quiet. The security guard argued, but eventually agreed. At 3 a.m., the intercom rang before I could even brace myself. Room 413. This time, the voice whispered something different. I found the stairs. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the end of the hall. The air felt denser, heavier, like I was climbing even while on the same floor. When I entered room 413, it was no longer the same. The space was larger, colder, faded. The walls were a different color, and the hospital sounds muffled, far away, like I'd stepped out of the world. In the corner of the room where there had been a cabinet, there was now a door. Old wood, iron handle. Like something out of a hospital from another century. I had never seen it before. It wasn't supposed to exist. I grabbed the handle. Ice cold. I turned it. Inside, a metal staircase leading down. No visible end. A cold breeze rose from below, like a breath coming from the hospital's core. And standing on the first step, him, facing away, thin, dark hair, white gown. Still. Miguel? I called out. He slowly turned his face, and for a second he looked normal. Just a patient. Young. Sad. Now I know where it is, he said, but I can only enter if someone leaves. Before I could ask what he meant, he climbed a step, and I started forgetting. I don't know how I got back to the nurse's station. I just remember waking up in the chair, morning light pouring in through the windows. Since then, something has changed. Room 413 now shows up as occupied in the system, but no one is assigned to it. And every time I walk past it, the bathroom light is on. This week, I had a dream. I was going down a metal staircase, dark, cold, and at the top, someone was watching me, wearing my uniform, wearing my badge. They say San Vicente Hospital will be demolished next year. I hope they do, but every night at 3:14, the intercom still rings, and someone still asks, "This isn't my floor, right?" We just wanted a quiet weekend. Nothing fancy, just laughs, music, drinks hidden from our parents. My name is Tyler. I'm 17. Me, my older brother Sean, and our friends Levi, Danny, and Mia went to spend 3 days at a lakeside cabin owned by Danny's family. The place is beautiful, isolated, surrounded by dense forest. No cell signal, no neighbors nearby. A teenage paradise. On the first day, we did everything straight out of a cheesy summer movie. Swam in the lake, made a campfire, toasted marshmallows. Nothing felt wrong. It was on the second day that things started to go sideways. Danny suggested a trail that started behind the property. He said it led to a beautiful lake view from a cliff. Of course we went. I packed a backpack with water, a flashlight, and my old pocket knife, a gift from my dad. We walked for about 40 minutes. Everything was fine until we started noticing strange signs. Torn pieces of cloth caught on branches, a rope tied to a trunk like someone had been trying to mark the way back. Mia saw it first. Is that a house? More like a cabin, really. Small, made of rotting wood, with boarded-up windows and a rusted antenna sticking out of the slanted roof. None of us knew there were any buildings around here. It felt like no man's land. Levi, always curious, wanted to check it out. Mia wasn't on board. This feels wrong. What if it's private property? Or worse, Sean added, what if someone's in there? But we were already too close. The front door was ajar. It smelled of mold thick in the air. Inside, it was dark, full of boxes, cans, scattered clothes. A mess that told us someone was living there. Or had been. Then we heard it. A muffled sound. Something between a sigh and a sob. We followed it, quietly, like we knew we were crossing some invisible line. Until Levi pointed. There's someone in there, behind a makeshift divider, some sheets hanging from rope. There was a filthy mattress on the floor. And on it, someone lying down. A woman, wrists bound, tape over her mouth. She looked at us. And in that look was something that shattered me. Not just desperation, but pure panic. Like we were about to do something worse than the person who put her there. Sean rushed over and tore off the tape. She started crying, trying to speak, but her words came out tangled. I only understood one thing she repeated several times. "He's close. You shouldn't have come in." That's when we heard the crack of a branch outside. Someone was coming back. The sound outside froze us all. A sharp crack, then another. Footsteps. The forest around us went dead quiet. No wind, no birds. Sean pulled the woman up, trying to free her. "Hurry! Someone help me!" But I couldn't move. Mia was shaking. Levi grabbed my arm. "Dude, we have to go. Now we call the cops after." "And leave her here?" Sean shot back. "What if he's got a gun?" Levi argued. "You want to die out here?" The woman started whispering nonstop. "He hears everything. He hears everything. He hears everything." That's when we saw him, through the broken window. A silhouette. Tall figure, walking slowly, carrying something over his shoulder. A sack? Firewood? We couldn't tell. But he stepped into the clearing. Stopped. We froze. He looked straight at the door, like he knew. Sean pulled the woman toward the back exit. We followed. No one looked back. We ran down the trail like the ground might collapse beneath us. The forest seemed darker, the trees closer. When we got back to the lakeside cabin, everyone was panicked. Mia threw up. Danny was shaking. No one said a word. The woman sat on the porch, in shock. "We need to call the police," I said. "No signal," Levi replied. "Then let's drive to town. Now, someone has to hear this." But the woman spoke first, softly. "He has eyes there too." No one understood, until Sean asked, "Who is he?" She just said, "He took me because I saw what no one was supposed to see." And she looked at each of us. "Now you've seen it too." The police arrived the next morning. The cabin was still there, empty. No sign of the man. No signs of a kidnapping. Like nothing had ever happened. And the woman? She vanished during the night. No one saw her leave. No trace. Today, we all try to live normal lives. Supposedly. But every now and then, I get messages from unknown numbers. Just one sentence. "You saw." And every time I close my eyes, I wonder, what if he's still out there, building the next cabin? When people ask me about my time at St. Alden boarding school, I lie. I say it was quiet, that the academics were tough, that I made good friends. The truth? I don't remember much. Or maybe I remember too much. My name is Evan. I'm 26. I attended St. Alden from age 14 to 17. It was a school meant to discipline gifted youth, as my parents put it. The place was Gothic, old, more like a monastery than a school. It sat deep in a Rhode Island forest, far from everything. For a long time, I believed my mind had just blocked out bad teenage memories, the kind of trauma that time usually erases. But last week, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, carefully folded and yellowed with age. One sentence, in familiar cursive handwriting. Do you remember room 313? I got chills instantly, not because of what it said, but because that room never existed, or at least that's what I used to tell myself. After that, the dreams began. Repetitive, endless hallways, the ticking of a clock, closed doors with cracked nameplates. And each night, I'd end up in front of the same one, 313, and every time before I opened it, I'd wake up. I started looking into it. Old photos of the school, blueprints, maps. Nowhere did room 313 appear. I posted on alumni forums. No one remembered. Or they pretended not to. So I went back. I drove all the way to where St. Alden used to be. The school has been shut down for 5 years. The gate was still there. Rusted, chained shut, easily cut. The building was abandoned. But the second I stepped inside, something hit me. The smell. The sound of the wind through broken windows. It hadn't changed. I walked the corridors, heading to the second floor where the old study rooms were. And there, at the end of the hall, a dark wooden door, its plaque cracked and dusty. I wiped it with my hand. 313. My heart was racing. I reached for the doorknob, and I heard a voice behind me. Software like a memory come alive. You've already been in there once, Evan. Why did you come back? The voice froze me in place. It was soft but clear, almost like it came from inside my head. I turned slowly, expecting to see someone. A former classmate, an old staff member, a hallucination. But the hallway was empty. The air felt heavier, and every step toward the door creaked like the floor itself knew what was about to happen. The doorknob was cold, almost icy. I turned it and stepped in. Room 313 was smaller than I expected. Few pieces of furniture. A wooden desk in the center, chairs pushed against the walls. The window was boarded up. Barely any light got through. At the far end, there was a steel cabinet, the kind used for archived files. It had a label, Records, Group C, 2012. My class. I opened it. Inside were several folders. Most of the names were vaguely familiar, but one of them stopped me cold. Liam Carter. A name I hadn't heard in over a decade, but it cut through me like a blade. He was my roommate, my best friend during my first year. Until he disappeared. The official story? A sudden transfer. Family issues. The truth was in that file. Patient with episodes of dissociation, diagnosed with temporal and spatial perception disturbances, claimed to hear voices coming from a room that doesn't exist. After disciplinary intervention, patient vanished. No record of discharge or transfer. My hands shook. Then came the sound behind me. A whisper. You promised not to tell. I turned. Nothing. But in the cracked mirror on the wall, I saw something. Someone. Standing behind me. Face shadowed, but I recognized the posture. The eyes. Liam. My head spun. Memories started to surface. Flashes. Us sneaking into a room that was supposed to be locked. Liam saying he'd heard a voice. That he wanted to show me something. The argument. The fall. The blood. And the silence that followed. I never told anyone. Buried it deep. St. Alden covered the rest. But now, he wanted to be remembered. When I left the room, I put the folder back and shut the cabinet. In the hallway, something new had appeared. A fresh plaque at the hallway entrance. Room 313, entry prohibited. But now, it existed. And every night since that day, I get an anonymous notification on my phone, always at the same time, 3:13 a.m. No message, just an image, the mirror's reflection, with two people in it. But I'm alone. Or I thought I was.